the FAA has faced pressure to diversify the air traffic control to adopt an additional screening test that was based on biographical details.
But it gets even worse than that, because this profile wasn't specifically Black people. It was white, progressive, mostly negative stereotypes of Black people. Angry all the time, can't take directions, bad at science. And a lot of Black people who had applied for these jobs were filtered out of getting these jobs. You are specifically filtering for an entire incoming class, and that's coming in this year, to these flight centers in the FAA that are managing the planes to make sure they don't crash into each other as they're landing. And you are explicitly sorting from people who like to take big risks, have no scientific background, and do not take criticism well from superior. You are basically guaranteeing crashes coming out of this.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, everyone. I am very excited to be opening us for a new Based Camp episode, especially because Malcolm the other day implied to me that he just didn't want to fly anymore. And I was like, what do you mean you don't want to take this trip? It was for something business related. And I think he just genuinely doesn't feel safe on airplanes anymore. And after we discuss what we're about to discuss, perhaps you too will fall into this category. Although I find it quite silly, because really it's getting in the car with an Uber driver who knows how little sleep they have, who knows how little training they have. Talk about standards. Anyway, I think it's overblown, Malcolm. I think you'll be okay. But things have been getting worse and worse with setting standards and making sure that the people who are running things in the airline industry, the aviation industry, be they pilots, be they airline CEOs, or be they working in air traffic control, are qualified. So
I want to take this in a much broader direction than this. Just this.
Okay.
So airlines is one aspect of this. Okay.
You see it as a microcosm.
It's just one example of the way systems are beginning to break. So in our governance book, and we're going to go deep into a number of the places we're beginning to see major systems fall apart. We talk about why things like communism fell apart. And the core reason communism fell apart is governance structures develop inefficiencies and internal sort of cancers the larger they get and the longer they last. And so if they're competing against, like, you don't have that big a problem within a capitalist system because you have a bunch of internal governing systems that are competing against each other. And as they get large and bloated, like, for example, the average length of time for a company to be on the Fortune 500 list, I think it's only 20 years or 30 years.
Yeah, basically, as soon as these private enterprises become non-competitive in a market-based system, they die because no one wants to use them anymore. That doesn't happen as much with government.
And so and then when you extend the government systems to individual operating parts of a country, you can much more quickly get catastrophic failures due to failures within a bureaucracy. And that's why I say that America is about to have its Chernobyl moment. This is what happened with Chernobyl fundamentally. And this happened, Chernobyl's the incident we know of, but there's actually many other incidents of communist market failures that basically led to deaths of millions of people. Obviously, the 5-year plan in China, the Great Leap Forward in China. Then you had that wheat incident in the Soviet Union that was like a failure of Soviet science, where a guy was I can attach a video on the subject. It's very interesting, and millions of people died. It was called the Lysenko affair, and Vsauce has a very good video on the subject titled "The Man Who Killed Millions Trying to Grow Food in Snow." But then obviously we know about Chernobyl, where somebody who didn't understand how nuclear power plants worked was in charge of managing safety at a nuclear power plant. And so when you have a system that no longer is elevating individuals based on their efficacy, you have the capability of major systems beginning to break. And I think, like you at the beginning of this episode, like laughing about it, it's so funny, we're not going to have something like that in the United States. And the reason why I'm putting out this episode, and the reason why I'm going to be titling it what I'm titling it, is I suspect within 5 to 10 years there's going to be a major incident in the US, which will make your laugh really morbid in reflection. We are going to have
here I am with a false sense of security. You're warning
I'm
me.
telling you that right now. Like, people are going to die. It actually already happened in Norway, for example. So
Oh
I don't
yeah, break
know.
this down. This was hilarious.
So in Norway, a multi-million-dollar warship under the NATO command was entirely submerged after it struck an oil tanker.
And this
Um,
this by the way blew out Norway's entire naval budget for the year. That was like just the cost of this damage is immense. This was thought to be an unsinkable ship because of the way it was built.
yeah, it was called an unsinkable ship. And here's a quote from an article on it. Questions remain as to why the well-equipped warship could not avoid hitting the slow-moving 62,000-ton, 250-meter-long oil tanker.
Not exactly, because people going through recordings of what was happening on the bridge at that time cite multiple instances of gross negligence and incompetence.
Well,
So
yeah, so here's another quote. Sound recordings and radar logs have revealed crude, almost incomprehensible human errors made by the crew. According to experienced naval
incomprehensible,
officers, the mistakes make the crew look like amateurs. And
which is
then
embarrassing, especially
this
for me and my kind being a female, because apparently a laudable and celebrated element of this unsinkable ship was that four
No,
of the five
4 out of
people,
5 of the crew members were women,
yeah.
and they had recently done an article that heaped praises on them for how pro-woman, because they had recently
Mm,
opened the ranks of the Navy to women in Norway, with the
mm.
article saying something like, "It's advantageous to have many women on board. It will be a natural thing and a completely different environment, which I look at as positive," one of the lieutenants said aboard the ship. And you look at things like this, and this is a ship that crashed, right? Like, people made it off safely from this. This is
Yeah,
not an
only what,
airplane
18
going
people were injured, but no one died. Okay, this is great.
we're not having infrastructure fall apart yet, or nuclear power
How
plants
it
go
did a
through
lot
a
of
hull,
damage
or
to the local, like, oil and gas industry, didn't it? In addition to
yeah, but
ruining the
I'm saying you haven't seen a plane with families on it fall out of the sky yet.
Mm.
I suspect we are going to see soon, and it's not, if you're like, "Oh, I heard about that airplane scandal." Oh, no. The scandal is in the manufacturing of the airplanes. There is an independent scandal in the training of the pilots, and there is an independent scandal in the training of the people who manage the air traffic controls. So if you have heard one of these scandals in isolation, you haven't heard them compounded. So go over the air traffic control scandal.
And I definitely want to direct everyone to my favorite overview done by Tracy Woodgrains over on his Substack, tracingwoodgrains.com. He did a really great summary, but the gist is basically this: that for a very long time, there was a lot of criticism faced by the FAA because they were not sufficiently diverse, which makes sense to us. Our dirty little secret is that Malcolm and I operate a travel management business. It's very heavy in aviation. And yeah, like airplane nerds and the kind of people who want to become air traffic controllers, which by the way is one of the most stressful jobs out there, are typically white men.
But
Um,
by statistics, it's one of the most stressful jobs out there.
by statistics, yeah. So I'm also not saying this is the world's most fun job, but also I'm saying airplane nerds are disproportionately white and male. We'll just say that. We'll see if we can get our daughter into airplanes. Our sons are definitely into airplanes, so at least there's that. So there was this, and keep in mind this has been going on for a really long time. I'm going to just read a couple of quotes from the article just to give you a little bit of some background. So Tracy wrote, historically, the pipeline into air traffic control has followed a few paths: military veterans, graduates of the Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative, also known as ATCTI program, and the general public. Whichever route they came from, each candidate would be required to take and pass the 8-hour AT-SAT cognitive test to begin serious training. This test was validated as being effective as recently as 2013. But then again, Tracy continues, the FAA has faced pressure to diversify the air traffic control for generations, something that seems to have influenced the scoring structure of the AT-SAT cognitive test used for pre-employment screening of air traffic control candidates. Leading up to 2014, that pressure intensified with the National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees leading that push. So I'm not going to read any more from the article directly, but basically what happened is this National Black Coalition encouraged the FAA to adopt an additional screening test that was based on biographical details that was essentially designed to not be passable. It failed 90% of those who went through it, many of whom had already passed all the other tests to begin training. They'd paid thousands of dollars for college credits and gone through all this time to become air traffic controllers. And then with 2 months' notice, they're informed of this new test they also have to fill out, and they are disqualified and not able to become.
It's worse than that. So then the organization that had prompted this, right? It was an organization for Black potential people.
The National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees.
Yes, so, quote, in particular, one Shelton Snow, an FAA employee and then prized president of that organization's Washington suburb chapter, provided its members with quote unquote buzzwords in January 2014 that would automatically push their resumes to the tops of HR files. A 2013 NBCFAE meeting advised members to please include on resumes if you are an NBCFAE member, emphasizing they were only concerns with the employment of African Americans, women, and other minorities. And then later, after the 2014 so this was what they did before they introduced this questionnaire, is they put specific words that would automatically get their resume pushed to the top. And one was being a member of this all-Black organization. But then after this questionnaire was launched, quote, after the 2014 biographical questionnaire was released, Snow took it a step further. As Fox Business reported, he sent voicemail messages to NBCFAE applicants, advising them on specific answers they needed to enter into the biographical assessment to avoid failing, stating that he was, quote, about 99.99% sure that it is exactly how you need to answer each question. So basically, on this test that 90% of people were failing, the Black applicants were being given all of the answers to the questions before
Black and female
the test. But it gets even worse than that, because we need to go into what these questions were. So in one question, it was something like, what was your worst test in school? The correct answer, the one that wouldn't cause you to fail, was my worst subject was science. Okay, so they are explicitly screening out all of the applicants whose worst subject wasn't science.
Yeah, and it's really worth going through some or all of the assessment. You can do this by going to Tracy Woodgrain's write-up on this. Someone, after seeing, I think, Tracy Woodgrain's coverage of it, took the actual assessment and then created a version of it online that you can interact with. And you can answer the questions and then see what you get wrong. And it is deeply disturbing and amazing at the same time.
We've got to go over some of the other crazy things. There was one about risk-taking behavior. The only correct answer in that one was that you do extreme risk-taking behavior. Is this who you want managing landing planes?
Yeah, they're basically
how well people respond to criticism from superiors. The only correct answer.
No, there was not an only correct answer. Basically, each answer had weird, arbitrary different weights, but the only response that didn't get you any points at all was that you moderately didn't respond well to criticism. And the answer that would give you the most points, that is points helping you, is that you really didn't do well with criticism from your higher
criticism from superiors. So if you talk about, if you are specifically filtering for an entire incoming class, and that's coming in this year, to these flight centers in the FAA that are managing the planes to make sure they don't crash into each other as they're landing, and you are explicitly sorting from people who like to take big risks, have no scientific background, and do not take criticism well from superior, and worse than that, are coming out of these ultra wokey, like people who have used their ethnic status for a long time to get ahead in life, you are basically guaranteeing crashes coming out of this.
Yeah, to be more charitable, what I would say, and I still think that all those things are real problems, is that there's a DEI-focused coalition of people who encouraged the creation of a test with a bunch of arbitrary secret answers, and they gave away the key to the insiders that they wanted to help in an effort to increase diversity.
True. You're misunderstanding what happened then. Yes. So a few of the subchapters of this national organization were able to give away the key to the questions. But in truth, the questions were meant to function as they functioned. 10% of people did get through. These 10% of people fit the profile that the test was sorting for. And keep in mind, this profile wasn't specifically Black people. It was white, progressive, mostly negative stereotypes of Black people. Angry all the time, can't take directions, bad at science, and a lot of Black people who had applied for these jobs were filtered out of getting these jobs.
Yeah, in fact, so there's currently still a class action lawsuit because this all happened around 2014, like from 20, I think 14 to 2018, these things were playing out. And then I think the assessment was removed around 2018. Of course, that hasn't undone the damage in terms of the pipeline of talent that we need to staff the FAA. But
Well,
now
the
there's
people we need to remove. I think they should remove anyone who passed this test.
there's a
Anyone who passed
loss.
this.
Yes, there's a lawsuit taking place called Brigida versus Buttigieg, sorry, where some of those who filed in part of this class action lawsuit were indeed themselves Black and were disqualified despite being qualified because of this assessment. So it does go to show that this assessment did not necessarily help Black people. It helped people who were on the inside of this organization, which I think feeds back into what you're saying
No,
about
I
governance.
think you're wrong here. Again, keep in mind, the questions that were given out to people were only some of the local organizations. Overall, this test did what it was intended to do, which was to elevate candidates who fit the progressive stereotype of Black characteristics, i.e., being stupid, having a bad temper, and not being able to take orders, get into positions within the aviation division. And I think that this fundamentally shows how genuinely the bad type of racist these progressives are. But I need to go further with this because this wasn't the only instance of this happening. Another instance where this has famously been happening recently.
During an interview with Axios on HBO, Kirby said the company was committed to ensuring 50% of their graduating pilot classes would be women or people of color. Elon Musk called Scott Kirby out for this on Twitter. I think that raised a lot of the awareness about this and also led to a lot of Twitter memes of people
Well,
talking
here's another
about.
time where Elon Musk called someone else.
And I just want to note here how much shit Elon has been getting from this from the ultra progressives. For example, in this one article by NBC News, Elon Musk criticized by civil rights groups over claim that diversity efforts make flying less safe. Mark Morial, president and CEO of National Urban League, said Musk's statements were abhorrent and pathetic. And then, of course, he goes on to criticize Twitter. Reminder to @Elon Musk providing a home for the proliferation of hate speech and white supremacy. Conspiracy theories kills people. Diversity, equity, and inclusion cultivates a more inclusive society. They are not the same. We are not the same, he added. Or you can check out the Guardian article on this particular topic. Worried about airline safety? Blame diversity, says deranged right-wingers. Or the Rolling Stones coverage of this. Conservatives are so scared of diversity, they're starting to boycott quote-unquote woke airlines. After twisting a Boeing safety issue into outrage over Black pilots and LGBT inclusion, the far right is taking aim at commercial carriers. So I would like to point out here that they're gonna get people killed, so they can win their stupid online firefights. They have so little concern for basic morality anymore.
So I don't know, you were telling me recently that the Boeing has gotten so bad with their planes that the White House won't let anyone on the staff fly in 737s anymore. And you told me about this yesterday.
I did not, but that's very interesting.
Wait, you were?
I did not tell you that. You had a lot of conversations with people yesterday, though.
Okay. Yeah, so the White House is no longer able to fly on 737s anymore, and they have to fly only on Airbuses because some issues was found with Biden's plane, and then they did a longer review, and they found out that they're just not considered safe enough to allow for White House staff to fly on them, or executive level staff to fly on them.
My God.
I should note this may not be public information because when I researched this, I wasn't able to find it. And it also makes perfect sense that the Biden administration would not want this officially announced that they were avoiding use of American-made planes for foreign-made planes.
And this gets worse when you consider this particular piece. So this one's titled, Former FAA Safety Expert Addresses Airline DEI Controversy.
Boeing, which allegedly prioritized DEI hiring in recent years, has found itself in the news after a door of one of the models operated by American Airlines blew off mid-flight. In an X post last week, billionaire Elon Musk asked if customers wanted to fly an airplane made by a company that prioritizes DEI hiring over safety management. Although I feel like it's so easy to know what kind of aircraft you're going to be flying on unless they switch it up at the last minute, which sometimes they do. It's much scarier thinking that we are landing in airports with air traffic controllers who may not be qualified.
But this is the problem. It's the air traffic controllers aren't qualified, the pilots aren't qualified, and the planes are being made by people who aren't qualified. Okay? Boeing pushed through designs that we knew were not safe. And if you want to dig deep into this, there's a huge rabbit hole you can dig into. But everyone knew the new 737s weren't safe and they were not supposed to go out. But Boeing needed to meet its numbers for its investors.
For more on this, see the Fortune article, Boeing seeks FAA exemption for safety standard on troubled 737 MAX planes, about them trying to get around safety regulations that everyone else has to follow on a plane that they know has problems.
And all of this is theoretical to people like you. Like at the beginning of this, when you were like laughing about this,
I know.
We're not going to have a giant plane filled with families crash into a major city due to.
I believe it. It's just that I haven't booked us seats next to an exit row one, never, because we can't afford to pay more for that. But also, they want the person next to the exit row.
It's not just exit rows. We're going to have major crashes.
Yeah, you just say like planes falling out of the sky.
Yes, and just because it hasn't happened yet, and I'm not saying that this happens across our economy. So one of my favorite little stories about diversity and inclusion is one of the less diversity and inclusion darlings, so much so that the New York Times did Patrick Chavis, 50, affirmative action figure, like about how great he was as an affirmative action figure. So this was an individual who in 1973, under a special program, got into
the
UC Davis Medical School over a white candidate who had better scores than him, Alan Blake, who was denied admission. Okay. Now, this guy's entire career has been one of terrible malpractice and just nightmarism, which he kept getting out of by claiming racism. For example,
there are apparently recordings of him doing procedures and whatnot with patients screaming. He started out in labor and delivery, and then I think got removed from that job after misusing forceps at one point, but then calling racism, and then portions and liposuction.
He used the fact that he had been removed for improper use of forceps to get promoted.
Oh, and then, I thought that was before the.
I can just read the piece here. Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
Upon completion of his residency in 1981 at Long Beach Medical Hospital, he was hired there at low level. He shouted racism and was promoted to associate staff physician without any training. By 1988, hospital staffers monitored his work. After a panel of physicians and administrators reprimanded him for a forceps delivery, Chavis cried racism again through a discrimination suit. A jury awarded him $1.1 million. This was later overturned, by the way, because it was found that he didn't know what he was doing. Chavis then undertook the noble art of abortions and liposuctions, or body sculpting, as he called it. He was sued for malpractice 27 times, had medical board complaints filed for 7 liposuction cases, and was accused of causing the deaths of one liposuction patient who he left in his office as her incisions oozed red fluid. The patient died there of a massive blood loss. A tape made during his liposuction procedures finds horrific screaming, in quotes, by his patients, as Chavis offers his bedside manner, quote, "Don't talk to the doctor while he is working," end quote, and, quote, "liar pants on fire," end quote. A judge suspended his license in 1997, writing an 11-page opinion that Chavis, quote, "demonstrates an inability to perform some of the most basic duties required of a physician," end quote. The Medical Board of California revoked his license in 1998 for, quote, "gross negligence, incompetence, and repeated negligent acts," end quote. Dr. blamed racist, quote, "white male," end quote, physicians for his problems. Just the people have already died due to DEI. This is insane. It is insane because that was just one doctor that the left covered for him. That piece in the New York Times about how great he was, that had happened after things like patients were dying or at least being severely injured by this man. So they cover up how bad this is until they can't cover it up anymore. When we have our Chernobyl moment, which is inevitable at this point, whether it's a bridge collapse or a tunnel collapse or a plane collision, we need to call out what caused it, just as Norway had happened with that giant ship collision. because real humans are going to die. That is inevitable at this point. It has gone that far. And if you're like, how do we prevent this from happening in the plane industry? You need to use the test that was testing for people who couldn't take feedback well from authority or hated science. Those are the people who should never be allowed to work in aviation. Every single person who passed that test should be removed from their jobs. And if they passed the test because they were given the answers, and you're like, okay, then they were just given the answers, they should also be removed from their jobs for dishonesty. Okay. In the real world, this is what we used to call cheating. All right. They have no business. This test filtered for incompetence and liars that made up an entire incoming class at the FAA. And I don't think it's not just that we need to let the other people in. We need to pull out every single person that passed this test, because these were not Black people disproportionately. These were liars and people who met a racist caricature of Black people. And they're going to make Black people look bad, because when one of them, and especially if they happen to be Black, who got through on this and leads to a plane crash, how do you think that's going to lead to the general public viewing the Black population? This is something that Black people...
it's a common affirmative action argument, right? That if people get under the impression that any sort of minority, any sort of group is in a room because of that status, they're going to assume that person is incompetent, which undermines the credentials of any competent person from that group.
It also long-term damages these groups. There's that great study that came out recently that looked at IQ gaps between Black and white populations and found that they were much smaller in districts that were more conservative and that had conservative politicians running them. So these affirmative action systems are permanently disempowering the groups that they're meant to empower. But what else could they do when they are defining those groups as incapable of taking orders, incapable of taking feedback, liking to take unreasonable risks, and being bad at science? And so when you look at stuff like this, the way the United States defeated the centrally planned bureaucracy of the Soviet Union was allowing the system to collapse under its own weight. As globalists, whether it's in the UN or within, because what is globalism really? I think people misunderstand like why people are so antagonistic. Globalism is the building of a giant bureaucratic elite that basically runs the entire world economy like a centrally planned system.
Not great. Yeah, okay, maybe flying is not, it's so expensive.
If you have a lot of kids, it's not something you really need to worry about, unless you're us and you're being flied out all the time to go speak at events, which is where the stress comes for us.
Because having a lot of kids means you can't afford to fly anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, we can't afford to fly with some of the kids. We just have to do it for work right now. But I would like a world where we're not doing that as much. We'll fly over our guest stars to meet with us when we're doing a reality show or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I love you, Simone. And
I love you too.
I really hope that when the horrifying inevitability of all of this stupidity comes to roost, that we call out exactly what caused this, and we don't pretend that it was anything other than racist progressives that caused this problem and the progressive racist agenda. And people say, why are you so mean to progressives all the time, Malcolm? Can't you just be... People are gonna die. Like a lot of them. Like, that's why I'm not being chill about this. Okay? It's not conservatives pushing this shit. They're like, it's only extremists pushing this shit. And it's like, no, it's not. And this is one of the problems I have. This is like saying most Nazis didn't approve of the Holocaust. Yeah, most Nazis didn't approve of the Holocaust. But when you vote for the Nazi party, that's the result. I agree. Most progressives do not approve of all this stuff, but the party that they are putting in power and the people that they are empowering through their actions are the ones implementing all of this. The only people who can take this down are the conservatives. So even if you have some distaste of conservative policies, and I won't say I love everything conservatives do, they are less damaging to people than what progressives are pushing through right now. And that's the problem, where it's one of these things where they're like, don't blame me for what the crazies are doing. And it's, yeah, but the crazies control your entire political apparatus right now. So when you vote for someone, even if they're a moderate, you are empowering the crazies.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting point. At the end of his write-up, for example, Tracy Woodgrains tries to argue that this at least should not be a partisan issue, that in the end, no one in their right mind is going to look at this assessment and say that they want people running the FAA who pass it, and that this is something that shouldn't be partisan, and that Pete Buttigieg has this amazing opportunity to fix this problem, which, by the way, was not fixed during the Trump administration. It just ran right through it. So it's not like everyone's on the ball here. And yet he's not doing it, which is very frustrating.
Well, I
and
need
of
to
course,
point
people
out,
followed up in the comments that, yes, this is a polarized culture wars issue, because to your point, the people who are empowered to do this are being empowered by progressive parties and by progressive coalitions. But
this is easy. If you want to fix this at the legislative level, you just pass a law that specifically targets, with jail time, anyone who implements explicitly racist policy.
Oh.
No, I think that once progressives start getting jailed over implementing racism, and this is racism, right? This is something
it is
that should
racism,
work.
yeah.
Or you could have, if you don't want to do jail time, what you need to do is you need to have fines for their companies and have lists of names of the individuals who participated in this stuff. Because the problem is when these people can leave one company and then go infect another.
Yeah,
These people
which
need
they
to be on a
often
list,
do.
and the companies they're working for need to be
like that terrifying doctor who would just go on and keep doing his thing.
They're basically leading to murder sprees. This is insane.
It's very scary.
And people will die if we do not systemically handle this issue.
Gosh, we can't afford to fly business class, and that's all I want to fly. So it's probably better that I have some other more logical excuse to
Well,
not
I'm
fly
pointing
at
out
all.
it's not just airplanes. This is going to be a bridge. This is going to be a something. A tunnel's going to flood. A building's going to fall over. You just wait.
I was trying to think like what airline would still be safe at. Of course, if air traffic control at US airports is not safe, then we're never really safe flying. But then the question is, are there carriers and are there airports that we can
the
still...
LATAM airlines are probably going to be much safer.
Yeah, and specifically LATAM Airlines we love, Copa Airlines we love. And Copa Airlines actually, man, they run a tight ship, as does LATAM actually. They're quite organized, so...
We say this is people who run a travel agency now. Maybe you should stop using these American airlines because they're racist hellscapes.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and Copa's adding a bunch of new U.S. destinations this summer. Just saying, guys. Was talking with their team yesterday. Yeah, and in Air Canada, Lufthansa, they're so buttoned up.
Yeah. But I don't know. They're in Europe. I wouldn't trust them. Anyway, love you to death, Simone. Have a spectacular day.
Bye.
Bye.